Good morning, everybody. Wow, boy, that was amazing. I saw all sorts of heads pop up. We're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully we'll, getting started a little early here, will give us some time for some questions. Kind of a hard act to follow, you know. If you're in the keynote, some really nice automation that we saw from Paul Boris. And then, of course, subject of government comes up. And so that actually really is a hard act to follow. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more positive news for you here today. Today we're going to talk about Varian Medical Systems maiden voyage with ME and MII. We've completed a project here recently, and we're actually in production. I'd like to start with a little bit of background. Up on the screen you see some of the devices that Varian Medical Systems makes. It's quite likely that if you've been associated with cancer at any time in your life, you'll be treated on those machines that you see there. You've got treatment planning on what is your right, the oncology system in the middle, X-ray tubes on that machine, and flat panels on that machine we'll be talking about today. How many of you know somebody who has been touched by cancer either in their own life or their family or somebody you know? I always like to ask this question because it's typically a lot of people. And actually, in my family, my wife is a survivor, stage 3, 5 years now. And so it gives me a great deal of comfort knowing that I work at a company that really helps to save lives. And so we're really pleased that she's doing as well as she's doing. So what about Varian? Varian works to save lives, and I can attest to that, I think, personally. The people at Varian collaborate with partners, with customers, with hospitals, in the industrial sector, with industrial leaders to produce equipment that's sold globally, worldwide. On any given day, it's about 250,000, 250,000 patients that are treated on our machines. Revenues are approaching about $3 billion, 2.6 right now in 2012. There's about 6,000 employees worldwide. We have manufacturing facilities in North America, in China, and in Europe. There are about 60 sales offices globally. We also have a large field service organization that's a global organization and fulfillment behind that operation. If you look at the picture on your right, that's the oncology systems treatment. You see the patient support assembly. That's a fully automated system. Technicians and engineers can get on that system anywhere in the world and look at the condition of the machine at any given moment. Below that you see X-ray imaging systems. There's in Salt Lake City where Jeff and I are from. We manufacture at that facility X-ray tubes and flat panels. Flat panels is a digital replacement for X-ray film. It allows image acquisition in real time. It's an exciting technology. And then here we have security and inspection products. Cargo scanning is based on the same technology that runs in the oncology systems. It's all about klystrons and magnetrons and waveguides and collimators and electron beam and acceleration. There's one business that's not represented here, and that's the proton therapy business. And that's a technology based on cyclotrons, long waveguides, and huge collimators. And that is for cancer treatment using proton beams. Nice thing about proton beams is when they treat cancer tumors, they leave most of their energy there, and they don't flow through the tissue. Electrons, on the other hand, go right through the tissue and can damage. There is some collateral damage when you're treated with electron beam. So really an interesting technology, and really a great company to work for. So agenda for today, I'd like to introduce myself, and then Jeff will introduce himself. My name is Brion Booth. I manage the SAP activities in the Salt Lake City facility. I have responsibility for the manufacturing execution portfolio and the compliance portfolio, regulatory compliance portfolio. So that means compliance applications and manufacturing applications. Up until recently, managed the SAP team, but due to some organizational changes, I still have site authority and responsibility for the SAP team. So it's like I get to do all the heavy lifting, and somebody else gets the credit. But I'm okay with that because I'm doing what I really would like to do in the manufacturing space at this time. So give Jeff a moment.
I'm Jeff Adams. I'm Director of Operations for the Varian Imaging Products, which is the division that produces the flat panels that you saw on the screen before. And Brian and I, been about 3 years ago, that I came to Brian and I said, hey, I need a system in manufacturing that helps improve visibility, helps us track better, all these sorts of things that we're trying to get out of a MES type system. And so we started researching, and it's been an interesting journey from there until now to finally have a system up and running on the shop floor. So we'll talk about how all that came about and what we're doing today.
Yeah, I have to say that it really makes a big difference to have a couple of like-minded individuals working together to pursue projects like this. It's been a great thing. I think Jeff and I have appreciated the opportunity we have to actually bring the technology to Varian. You know, it's interesting. Varian is ahead of the market in a lot of areas and sometimes behind in some of this type of technology. And so it's really nice to get an opportunity to be part of bringing this to the company. So agenda-wise, we'll talk about the journey, the project journey. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about the benefits, the drivers, the team, kind of what ISA 95 says about manufacturing execution, just to give us a framework within which to work. The rollout, the functionality we have, and then of course the challenges and some of the milestones that we've accomplished, and then what our future vision is. So, you know, it took us. So this is the Titanic, right? Jeff and I realized that we were going to have a challenge at Varian, right? I have to tell you that one of the things that really helped us be successful in our project was the chief executives, the CEO, the CIO, they really let Jeff and I kind of govern how this project went. And so that's a two-edged sword. So they approved the money, and then when the problems were there, they approved us dealing with the problems, right? And so looking at the journey, there were times when it felt like we were heading for the icebergs, right? But at the end of the day, you know, we were really able to kind of leverage some of the things that we were learning and put on the helmet and get on the wave. And we learned an awful lot in our project journey. We're an adventuresome bunch out there in Salt Lake City. We're not all about cowboys and shoot-'em-ups, but we really enjoyed working together to put this technology in place. And we are actually beginning to start to see some returns on our investment. Just the idea that you can integrate SAP transactions at the push of a button incrementally over time, that's a big savings, actually. So here's some of the business benefits. Probably our biggest driver was paperless manufacturing. Our ROI was based on taking the paper out of the process. It's really a conservative way, but actually, as Jeff and the business team looked into how much time would be saved in the process, we're an FDA-regulated entity, so that means everything, all the I's have to be dotted, the T's crossed. When we looked at that incrementally over time, the ROI was justified almost completely on record keeping and paperless. We didn't even touch some of the other areas for the ROI. So that was really instructive to us. You know, if we could put this in place, put a manufacturing execution system in place, and realize benefit just on not doing the paper, that told us that we would probably realize some other benefits as well. So new user experience. You saw some really nifty automation from Paul in SAP. We actually did some benchmarking, which I'll talk about. But in one of the facilities that we visited, contract labor force, always moving and churning, right? We actually tested them. We went out onto the factory floor and we said, do you know what SAP is? And they answered and said, no, we have no idea. Because the manufacturing execution system in the user interface and UX experience isolated them so much they had no idea even that they were looking at a large ERP. They had no idea, really. So that was an indicator to us in benchmarking that we wanted to do the same type of thing. Real-time DHR. This is an area that you'll see. We have an example of it today. We spent some time developing this. It looks a little different than the standard ME device history record. We're kind of proud of how it turned out. Of course, there's the integration. We automate backflushes, transfers, issues, and we do leverage occasionally the store and forward technology during backup. So in Salt Lake City, the flat panel factory can continue to operate. Process enforcement and control is a big one for a relatively new business. I think Jeff will probably talk a little bit about that later on. We do some integration to final test systems at the database level, so we actually start a process in ME, pass some data to the final test system, and then get data back, and you'll see that in the DHR. So that's pretty cool, and the calibration system as well. Flat panel is a fairly new business, and so most of the SPC that was done in flat panel was being done manually, often analysis through Minitab. So we've implemented some SPC data collection and some real-time charting for the business. We do actually have e-sign process within ME and quality control steps that are signed off in the application, serialization, and then cycle time. We'll take a look at some examples of these. So, benchmarking. So why do an MES system, right? So we, before we launched on our project, we took some time to do some research and analysis. And so we got on airplanes, and we went over the country, and we visited various facilities that had manufacturing execution systems in play. And we did this specifically for the 3 or 4 bidding companies. We wanted to see what each flavor looked like, so it wasn't just one flavor. So two-edged sword there too. We'll talk a little bit about that. But we learned an awful lot. There were 5 facilities, one in Michigan, one in New York, one in Oklahoma City, one in Pleasanton, California, and one in Ogden, Utah, just up the road from us, basically. So we did do some diligence. And through that process, we began to get some answers as to why you would do a manufacturing execution system. So these are real case studies, by the way. This is a med device, a couple of med device manufacturers. You'd probably recognize who they are, but they'll remain anonymous for legal reasons during the presentation. But on the right, you'll see that and it's kind of hard to read. I understand it's a little bit of an eye chart, but on the right, MES goes into play, then quality yield goes up, and significantly, actually. On the left, this is about recalls and about MDRs. And so the lines against the revenue bars basically show that after implementation of an MES, when a new product, that's the blue line, when a new product was introduced, MDRs were very low. So that impressed us being an FDA-regulated company. Pharma, this is interesting. So complaints and recalls. So projected trends of complaints and recalls. Now, you and I both know, right, that you can't really control how people complain and when they complain. It's just a fact of life. They're going to do it, right? Sometimes you're going to find stuff that you want to put a kappa in play for. But I think it was interesting that they were able to stem the forecast tide of complaints. Basically, it kind of flattened out. Recalls, on the other hand, dropped off significantly. And so these are the kind of results that we were looking for. And this one's interesting as well. So it's kind of hard to see, but the blue is yield. The kind of the yellowish orange is nonconformances against DCOs. And so from week 5 to week 6 in this particular period, yield is way up once the MES goes into play. So we thought this was really interesting information. We felt like this was the kind of research that we wanted to confirm our direction. So NBA finals are over. Couldn't help but put a small little icon up there. But any Spurs fans here? Okay, it's too bad, sorry. Yeah, me too. So this project, though, really took some resources on the business side, and we actually engaged a system integrator to help us. But on the business side, this is what it looked like. So one of the things that we learned is that the business needs to have an engineering type person in play. We feel like if we don't, and this is a lesson learned, every benchmarking facility that we went to, from 1 to 4 manufacturing engineers were involved on the business side, and we've chosen to adopt that as our approach as well. So engineer, manufacturing engineer, doc control, quality documentation. We have members on the team from that area. Sponsor, in this case it was Jeff, right from the business side. Then on the IT side, MES analyst, MII developer, and then basis. Basis was huge for us. Our first time through, this was the longest pole in the tent. Honestly, we couldn't seem to build the system right. And we worked with SAP to be able to overcome some of that, and we were able to be successful finally. But that was a big area for us. And then myself as sponsor on that side. We did have SAP working with us. We actually had really kind of unprecedented access to one of the product owners for ME, and she really helped us, during implementation. We worked with Customer Watch, so this is SAP's way to help you get through the build, get stuff set up and ready to go. They were very helpful for us. And then, of course, the wonderful historical SAP OSS message system, right? Helped us quite a bit, actually, as we were moving along. On the consulting side, we worked with Atos as our consultant. They provided us an MES analyst as well. We found that we needed to bulk up in the MII area because it was brand new to us for reporting, for some of the things that we wanted to do. And then we engaged a validation consultant, which was a very wise decision on our part. Not having done one of these projects or systems before, this really guided us and helped us. So taking a paper process that could have taken 6 months, they helped us through modifying HPQC and updating it for e-sign. We were able to accomplish most of that in about 2 months at the end of the day. So elapsed time through the project. So that was very helpful. And then, of course, the training consultant. Change management is a big deal when you move from manual processing in ECC to an automated process that doesn't look like ECC. So that really helped us quite a bit as well. I want to talk just a moment about integration and automation. So you saw the Titanic, right? And the choice between 3 bidders for MES systems took us down a path that we didn't think we were going to go down. But we thought this would be a 2-week decision. It ended up being an 8-week decision. And when we appealed to our leadership, they quite gracefully responded to us that, well, you made this process, so finish it and make the decision. So we didn't quite get to fisticuffs. We had debates. We had rebuttals. There was some waterboarding. There was some stuff that happened. CIO involved, one of the division general managers involved. But we finally got to a decision. And some of it hinged on the fact that if you choose SAP's ME, you get this integration out of the box. You really, and for those of you, we're just new, so at ME really, over the last couple of years, but it just works, okay? And so what that means is that we, on the IT side, could spend time actually focusing on the process for Jeff and his business, right? We didn't have to worry about the integrations. Sure, you got to configure it, you got to set it up, you got to monitor it. There's an ECC part, there's an ME part. You have to understand what that's all about. But again, it's a lot easier than building it from scratch, assembling the components, and making sure that everything works. So we learned that. We do bring master data down. We bring materials and bombs, planned orders and production orders. We're kind of a hybrid operation in flat panels, so primarily repetitive. So you have backflushes, non-serialized backflushes, and then you have serialized components at the top level. And so we do production orders at the top level. We do have live interface to fluke calibration application, MetCal, that provides tool verification for when things are happening and then things are being built. And then receptor automated test protocol. And this is our final test system where we actually share information back and forth between the systems. And we'll probably end up doing some more interfaces as we go. So why should a business care about this? I think touched on this before. The tools exist. They're already there. It's a lower cost of ownership, really. But honestly, it focused us in IT on the process. That was very helpful. Because of the way things are set up in the integration in MII and SAP MENT, basically, you're aware immediately, as long as you're monitoring, when there are issues, when they come up. Luckily, we haven't had too many issues. In fact, most of the issues that we had, there's only been a couple in our integration so far. We've been live for coming on 6 months now as human-induced. So we've been able to troubleshoot and find out, that we did some stuff that we shouldn't have done, right? But we're able to fix it. So just a quick look at the ISA 95 standard for MES systems. There's basically 4 levels. Wanted to give folks an idea of where everything plays. You saw some of this in some of the other presentations, but basically ECC sits at the top level at level 4, level 3, where you have your LIMS systems, maybe a WMS, maybe in certain applications automatic place and pick activities and robotics, but ME would play in that space along with MII, probably down at the next level. So this is where you have your supervisor control and data acquisition applications, PLCs, distributed control systems. This type of information is where MII plays, and it also moves up and down between level 2 and 3 and 1 pretty well, 1 in some cases. Here's what it looks like functionally. So MII really is the transmission layer to provide information to MES, to ME, and through PICO. We haven't leveraged PICO as much yet because we don't have a lot of automated use cases for the flat panel business, but some of our future projects do. So we're going to learn how that all works at the end of the day. And then back up through SAP MENT, back up into ECC. This is what we have implemented in Salt Lake City. So it's really important from an IT perspective to put in the framework. So that's why there's a check next to foundation, right? At the end of the day, if you're able to do this framework and leverage it, maybe that's a lot better than having all sorts of different applications that you need to maintain, right? So putting the framework in place was really important. So we have traceability, test and repair, production transfer in the interface, floor stock management, tool management, reporting. We're just now starting to look at business objects. We haven't done a lot there. Most of our reporting has been done in MII. And then nonconformance management along with the integration layers in the software development kit. It's hard to see, but there's some little blue check boxes there. We looked at those functionalities, but decided that bang for the buck right now wasn't there. So time-sensitive material, figured that maybe that wasn't something that we wanted to look at right now. So made some of those types of decisions. Just a quick look at MII. Some of you have, sir? Yeah, we do. So what we do is we use SAP's HC module. And so what we've done to kind of help in that area is created reports through MII so people can see what they did. So the vision going forward will be to have some kind of full integration there. But for right now, first time through, we were thinking that we just help by presenting that information on report. So an operator can dump and they can see what they've done, over a period of time. Helps record. MII, some of you have probably seen this. I like to call it the squid, but basically you have information coming down to ME, information in transaction processing going up. You have devices across the enterprise that you can connect up through PICO. The only thing I would say here is that MII is really a powerful reporting tool because of its ability to connect up to various different data sources, whether it's machinery or whether it's databases or even flat files. You can connect up and you can process that data and leverage it. So with that, I've been talking a bunch here. Any questions before we move on? Go ahead. Sure. So it wasn't our business users, but it was people in the benchmarking sites that we went to. They really had no idea that they were using a back end like SAP. We went out and asked them. Now, UI was a big deal for the business, right? it really determined some of the decision making that we made around which manufacturing execution system to buy and to support. And so it's been interesting. What's happened is we've been able to provide a friendly enough, and you'll see this in one of the slides, a friendly enough interface where the focus is switched from usability right now to what's actually happening in the process. So that's kind of the evolution that we've gone through. We enhanced. So SAP told us, nope, can't do anything. So the difference between some MESs and ME is that it's WYSIWYG. You can drag and drop, really nice. You can do all sorts of stuff, versus ME, which is what I call configure and publish. So, and that's done for a specific reason in ME because of this integration that you get with MII. You kind of have to know what you're doing and where you're at on the screen to be able to provide the information and hook up to the hooks that are in the system. So with that, we'll turn time over to Jeff here.
Okay, thanks, Brian. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the project itself and our implementation, how it went out on the shop floor and the way we did the validation and things like that. This is a one-slide view of our project. I won't go into all the details here, but we planned in the beginning a 6-month project to roll this out. As we got into it, we realized it was going to take a little bit longer. We stretched it to 9 months. And in the end, solving some of the issues that we found in validation, we ended up actually at 11 months. So even 11 months in a scale that of this kind of a project, I think we did pretty well keeping this under a year. But just to give you an idea of some of the different activities, obviously we have development activities. Being an FDA-regulated business, the verification and validation of the system was huge for us. And so that took quite a while. You know, by the end of December, you see that red box in the middle, 12/28. We were technically, the system was ready to run, but we had to validate it. We run a paper process right now, and so the gist of our validation is we took a lot of material, and we ran it through the system, and after doing the training, we had operators filling out both the standard paper records that we normally keep all the time and doing entry into the electronic system side by side. And then we took, at the end of that process, we took those records and compared them and tried to demonstrate that the electronic record is just as valid and covers every bit of information that the paper record does. First time through, we found some holes in that, and so it was a good way for us to do this. We ran another, so we fixed those holes, ran another lot through. We were able to show that they were equivalent. That was good enough for our QA people and validation partners, and that's how we accomplished the validation. So this is kind of scope of what we have. We're right now about in the middle of our rollout, and I'll talk about that a little more in a second. But we set out a schedule of a new product family going into the ME system every 2 weeks. Right now we have about 150 licenses. We have some support teams, and I'll talk about who those are and what they're doing. We've trained our operators, we've trained our managers. We can train what we call continuing engineering, which is really manufacturing engineering, on how to use the system, especially how to use the SPC. We have a group, this is not MIT, the college, that's called the Manufacturing Improvement Team. That's a group of engineers that deal mostly with our non-conforming product and how we can learn from non-conforming product to make the process better and improve it that way. And then Brian mentioned the RATP system. That's our automated testing system, and a lot of data comes out of that system. And so that took quite a bit of time to figure out how to get all of that data, port it into the database in ME so that it's available in the device history record, you know, after the fact.
Quick question. Is this
Sure.
one site that you're doing the rollout?
Yeah, thanks for, I should have mentioned that before. So Brian mentioned several different kind of divisions of Varian Medical Systems in different businesses. For flat panel right now, we are one site in Salt Lake City, so having kind of a contained operation where we can focus our team, and I think that was helpful in keeping our project on track. I think if we had to go across the world, multiple sites, it would have been a lot different kind of approach.
Are most of 150 licenses, do they also have an SAP license, or are they able to just?
I don't know.
They are an SAP license. Yeah. So we'll get to buy some more when we increase the footprint.
In the back?
What did you use for serialization? Did you use AII, or was there something that was in ME that?
That's a really interesting question. And so For us, the heart of our panel is a glass sensor. And we actually have just traditionally used the serial number that was issued by the manufacturer of that glass panel. And we use that all the way through the system to identify that unit within the manufacturing system. And we wanted to continue with that practice. One of the problems we had is we go through 4 different levels of assembly as we go from the beginning to the end of that process. And in the past, we've just used the same serial number all the way through. Well, you can't do that in ME because it requires a unique serial number for each stage, each sort of finished assembly, if you want to call it that. And so we solved that problem simply by creating prefixes for each stage. And so we'll have a different prefix for each of the 4 stages. That way we can have a unique number all the way through, except the tail end of that unique number in every case is the serial number of the unit. And so we do have that traceability all the way through. And then we'll show you some of the reporting that we did. The reporting engine then goes in, and it's smart enough to pull off the prefix, and it can access all of the records all the way from the beginning to the end. Even though they're different SFC numbers, it can get all of that data and put it together in one report for the device history file.
Yeah, so quickly, SFC is shop floor control number. It's the identifier that identifies a unit of work in the system.
Okay, so I mentioned 4 different BOM assemblies as we go through. The first 3 we do as a repetitive production in SAP, and then the last one we actually issue a production order so that we can take all of that serialized data and create an install base and push it up to ECC as an install base at the last operation. We build different subassemblies, have about 60 plus different operations. POD stands for Production Operator Dashboard. That's basically the screen that the operator sees. We spend a lot of time customizing those screens, and I'll show an example of that in just a minute. Right now we have 3 different product lines that equates to 27 different product families and about 500 plus end part numbers or end systems that we sell to our customers. As far as the system side, maybe Brian can come in on that a little bit.
Just quickly, so in ME60, it's extra special. You get to build 2 NetWeaver stacks for every implementation. So each of dev, QA, and production sits on 2 NetWeaver stacks, one for the ME side, one for the MII side. That's going to change in 6.1, yay. So now we won't have 16 or 32 systems that we have to maintain at the end of the day. ME, MII, ECC, of course, and then Statit is the SPC software. We heard a little bit yesterday from Tracy on how that's going to evolve. And then we actually tried to leverage the Adobe Document Services that comes bundled with ME. We found that we needed a little bit more support, so we ended up using Loftware. That was the lesson learned for us. So depending on what you're trying to do, ADS may be a solution for you. Loftware was the solution for us as it worked out in our process. And of course, we talked about the CAL system and the test system. So those are the systems.
So one comment about the Fluke system. What that means is when an operator starts an operation and they click a button that says, I want to use a tool in this operation, a calibrated tool, and it gives them a list to choose from of which ones they use. When they choose that tool, it goes back and checks in the calibration system and says, is that tool's calibration up to date, yes or no? If the answer is no, it won't allow them to use that tool in the system. So that's how we manage compliance to calibration, is through that system.
Question on your final test data, so you get all the data in the MII?
We do. We use MII to bridge those 2 systems.
That's right.
So if one of the system is down, so is this real time? So always MES is integrated real time, or some batch job?
Mostly real time. So in the case of Fluke, that's really job based, right? So the information is coming over periodically. And I believe it's the same way with the final test system. We run, instead of running an ECC job though, we run an MII process to go get it, and that's on a small interval.
Yeah, so basically the test system is kind of a standalone piece of software, and it runs and it does all the testing, and then once it's complete at the end, then it does a dump of the data to the ME system through MII.
Yeah, the test activity though doesn't start necessarily until ME hands over the serial number.
That's right.
So it's really interesting the way we have it set up.
It goes both ways. Yeah,
it goes both ways.
It pulls what's the product number and the serial number from ME, then it goes off and does the test, and then all the results get dumped back in the back end.
So do you guys have any rate configuration that is used with MES?
Not in this business, but one of the assessments and projects we have set up it's big time configurator. So we're learning to walk before we run in that sense. But eventually, yeah, we will look at having to support that kind of a business at the end of the day.
So I'm going to give you a view of exactly what we did from the user interface standpoint. Go ahead.
Are you using process orders or production orders here?
Production orders at the top level, and then the rest is repetitive, so no production order.
Yeah, so through the first 3 levels, it's the repetitive order and then one production order. So as far as the user interface, this is a representation of screens that should be familiar to everyone in the room, kind of the traditional ECC, how it looks. This is what we created for our ME system. I happened to be wearing a particularly attractive purple tie one day when we were having the discussion about what colors we ought to use. And so we ended up with the purple banners on here. And we'll talk about the buttons. We did a lot to customize the buttons and customize these screens. So one of the things there is if within your scope of work what you need to do, you only need 3 buttons out of what's shown right there, then there will be a screen customized for you that only has those 3 buttons. And the workflow for the operator is very simple. Left to right, they just click start, they click the next one, they click the next one as they're building their product, and they click done, and that's it. If they need to gather some data, then we have a data collection button put into the flow for them. If they need to run a test, then we have a test button put into the flow for them. And then on the right-hand side is a series of buttons that allow them access to reports and other information and log a nonconformance and other things that they might not use every single time through the process. Those are there for their convenience on the right-hand side. In the future, we're starting to define our project to go to version 6.1 of ME, and that's going to allow some screens that look like this. They're more tuned to touchscreen type devices and things like that. Hand in the back. We have stuff, I guess normally you'd say something's in WIP for 3 weeks to a month. I mean, if we really took one unit and pushed it through, we could probably do it in about a week and a half, but just kind of the normal flow, 3 weeks to a month. It depends on what they're doing. Anywhere, probably the shortest station is maybe 45 minutes to some of our final testing takes over 8 hours to complete the test.
So within that time frame, how does the operator know what he's supposed to be doing based on that screen?
That's a good question. I think I can go back one here.
Go back, yeah.
So this button right here is for the work instructions, and so they click that button. The system's smart enough to know what part number and what type of product they're working on, and it goes and it pulls up the work instruction in a separate window. And so basically, ME's running in one window, their work instruction's running in another, and they can follow that work instruction. One of the things that we've had to work on enforcing is that they really do follow the process in ME, meaning that when they sit down at their workbench to work on something, they click on start to start with, and then they go and they do their work and all of that, and then they click on complete when they're done. That gives us the real process time that they actually used in building that product. You can imagine that somebody could sit down, do their unit, and they're like, oh crap, I forgot to do ME, and so they click start and they click through all the buttons and done, and you get a 30-second process time rather than a 45-minute process time. And so that's one of the things we're working on, making sure people are compliant to that kind of stuff.
Interesting point about the complete button, right? So the clock starts ticking when you start, and that complete button stops the clock, but it also sends a backflush. So you don't have to go into MFBF any longer, right? They hit the button, it's invisible to them, the integration takes off and sends the backflush depending on the pod and what the functionality is there.
So there was a question over here before about, people don't know that they're using SAP at all. The way this screen looks is really dramatically different from the screen in the upper right corner, and again, the people could be using the screen and not even know that there's transactions and other things going on in the background with SAP. There was a hand over here.
How do you take care of the handling in this case? And you talked about backflushing. What happens if you don't care?
So good question. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say because we have the process control in place now in ME, we have fewer errors, right? When they do occur though, because right, they are going to occur for reasons not related to ME at all, right? Might be a supply chain issue, might be an inventory issue, whatever it is. So in the flat panel environment, that would hit a reprocessing list in ECC. Okay, and so if that backflush produces an error, there are people that are watching that reprocessing list, right? We don't allow negatives in this plant, right? So at the production order level, it's immediately visible, right, in the production order itself. So that's how we catch the errors.
So the user, the operator, he thinks the backwards went through, right?
Right. Well, he'll get a message, right? So the integration works both ways, right? So down on the status bar, in the case of ME, up at the top, he'll get a notification.
That's right.
But to actually resolve the error, somebody's watching it externally in ECC. So.
I see on this pod, does that say work list?
Uh-huh.
The rows are at the bottom.
Yes, that's the work
That
list.
shows like the working process for that workstation.
That's right.
Do you have
Mhm.
any rules on what order to run next or what item to process next?
One thing that ME doesn't do right now, it doesn't really schedule work, right? Just like you said, if they got 5 things waiting for them to work on, it'll give a list of those 5, but won't necessarily tell them what to do next. And so we just have to handle that through the management of the production system, priorities and things like that to tell people what to do next.
Yeah, and it's mostly planned orders that are coming down, right? So they'll be released manually now. Next step in our integration will be to change the process in ECC so that that can be happening automatically, right? So.
Okay, so moving on here. So another thing is about the buttons. So one thing you can do with ME is you can choose your own icons and customize these buttons as much as you want. And so we had a couple of people that got kind of excited about this, and they went out on the internet and they found a bunch of little icons and debated about them and all of that. But this is some of the things that we came up with of, for example here, we need to fix something, we need to replace a component. We found a little fix-it button and a serialize button and nonconformance, and we really don't like nonconformances, so that's a thumbs down when we have a problem that way.
Big debate about the easy button versus the fix-it button and the colors. Oh my goodness. So.
Anyway, so that was sort of a fun thing, and I think it really added to the functionality of the system to be able to get descriptive icons that help the operators understand what they need to do. We mentioned the paperless process. That is actually kind of an issue because you've got to identify your product all the way through. You have to know what it is, what part number it is, what status it is. And so we have some simple labels here. These were some of the test labels where you see people's names in there. That's a substitute for the serial number. But this is what it looks like. It'll say, this is the prefix that I mentioned before. This stands for tested receptor, and then a dash in the serial number, the part number, and another serial number without the prefix for scanning into other systems where we want to record the serial number, like our testing system, things like that. This is a non-conforming label. Anytime you log a non-conformance, then a non-conforming label prints out, and that identifies it as a non-conforming unit, and then we work it through the non-conforming system. Once non-conformance is satisfied, then we can remove that label. We use Loftware to manage all of that label printing and all of that. And validation, I kind of talked about validation before. Did you have a comment on that?
Just a quick comment. So, and some of you may have heard me say this before in other venues, but just because you change the process doesn't mean you don't have to validate the paperless process as well. So think about how you would do that. So if you're manually running paper, right, and you move to paperless, then you need to actually validate that. And that's where our validation partner came to the fore for us and said, you need to think about this. Because when the auditors come in and ask, they're going to ask you, what did you do to validate the process? And so, to Jeff's credit here, what he decided to do is we actually talked and we ran event-driven validation. So we actually took paperwork packets out on the floor, and then we went back to the system and we said, okay, here's how this one played out. We had a rework here, we had a scrap here in this paperwork. Can we actually play those in the system? And that was a lesson learned for us. So that really helped us in the validation, right? We actually knew that ME was going to behave properly given real life situations, right? So
it helped us write a bunch of the validation test cases
It did.
by taking the actual paperwork packet and reproducing those situations in the system.
Yep.
This is a BOM report. So this is some of the stuff we've done with MII now. Within the ME system itself, you can look at a BOM. It was a little bit hard to read, and it didn't contain all of the information that we wanted to present to our operators, and so we decided to take MII and create our own bomb report. And the interesting thing here is, to get the data that's shown on this screen right here, MII has to get some pieces of data out of the ME system, some pieces of data out of the ECC system, bring it all together and put it on a report for the operator.
Yeah, so the scenario here is I'm an operator, right? I want to build something, and I want to know what I have available, right? What do I have available? MII goes out and aggregates this data from both systems and puts it there. Operators can then go get the parts, right?
Does it generate pick list?
Not yet. Flat panel doesn't necessarily yet have a pick list use case because the material is right there. Most of the material is pretty close to them,
Yeah.
right?
We do point of use inventory.
Yeah,
so.
it's point of use, it's RIP, it's forward RIP, kind of implementation. So they don't have a need to go gather stuff up so much. It's usually within arm's reach. So.
This is the device history record. I'm going to let Brian talk about this. He's a little more familiar than I am. But again, this was a custom created report through MII that we made to do our device history record.
Yeah, nice thing about this is we can pick up test log information. So you heard us talk about the integration with the test system. So right now, in the DHR, this thing gets built in real time, right? It's set up based on chapters. So if you look at the left-hand corner there, I can click on those bars. It will give me a chapter of data, basically. So this is the result of our test system integration. You've actually got measurements over there on the right-hand side. You've got the serialization there, ties that all together in that chapter. So another one is the calibration. You heard Jeff talk about, hey, did I check my cal? And we did. It's here in the DHR. And then finally, this last one is interesting. So serialization, right? So this shows, it's hard to see, but it's over on the right-hand corner here, a build serial number. So there's a subassembly that we built and put a serial number on it. But there's also vendor-supplied PC boards there with serial numbers. Okay, so we're able to capture that in the process and then make that part of the DHR so that we know if this thing ever comes back, we can go to the DHR, we can look at what serial PCB was there if it turned out to have a problem. So. So it's both. It's both because we trace it. So ECC, right? Weakness, you can only do a final backflush and have a serial number. Pre-final backflush, it can be open, what I call open lot or non-serialized. So at the end, we make this install base and we include all the serial numbers that we have in ME. We push that up to ECC in the integration. So there's a as-built install base in addition to the DHR that records it. So.
I think we're...
You expose this to your customers? That's something that you need? Or?
Not yet.
No. Yeah, they don't really need it. It's mostly for our repair, service and repair department. But I guess we could give them some if they ask
or
for it.
Or if there's a regulatory issue that came up, right? You could go back to the DHR for every single build and you'd know, what you built.
Okay, I think we're sort of running out of time
We
here.
are.
So
So we'll go quickly here. So we talked about queue time, tuck time, right? So on the left, this is out of the box functionality. You have an SPC chart. On the left, you have queue time versus actual time. It's an hour versus 55 hours. So out of the box, you can see that kind of difference, right? So we're in ME, there's a lot of standard reports that come with it. You can look at those and see if they're useful.
so kind of where we're at, milestones, we're using this system every single day. There's product active in the system. I mentioned that well, maybe I didn't mention it, but we took those 27 product families and we divided them out into every 2 weeks we're going to release a new family. That will take us out through the end of September to be completely integrated paperless on the floor. So we're living sort of in this middle world right now. Some products running paperless, some products running with paper, but we're managing that. Some of the things that we're working on solving, we're not really happy with, I guess, the way that we can see the chronological history of the assembly. When our engineers, if something goes wrong, our engineers kind of need to go back and rebuild what has actually happened to that unit. the data's there, but it's difficult to see, and so we're working on a better report from that. Another thing, the out-of-the-box reports, let's just say you wanted to look at yield, and I wanted to know yield for the last 6 months or something like that. You put that in there, and it tells you over the last 6 months your yield was 88%. But I want to know, what was it in January, what was it in February, and in order to do that out of the box, I have to run separate reports for each of those time periods. I really want a trending type report, and so we're working with MII to try to get that sort of a thing. Still have a few operators that are hesitant to the change, and they're unsure, and so we're working on that. And then the last thing is we sometimes will put a temporary change or something like that out on the floor, and right now we physically sign those documents before shipment, and so we're working on how do we make that paperless. Do we sign it and then scan it and attach it? Is there a way to run an e-sign through the people that need to sign it? Those are some of the things that we're working on.
So just real quickly, we do have projects in the other business units. Folks are interested, and so we're doing assessments. We're going to be looking at analytics, UI. We're going to try and, in the 6.1, you saw the 6.1 UI, we're going to try and tailor that a little more like we did with the 6.0. And then right hemisphere, we're really interested in that. And the reason we're interested in that is we have a couple of several initiatives going at once. PLM initiative, MES initiative, and customer experience initiative. And it's our hope that we'll be able to connect up to the PLM information that's going to be that's being produced right now, and provide that to the manufacturing users as well. And that's it.
So I think we're probably a little over time.
Yeah, we're
so
over time,
if
yeah.
anybody's got questions and you want to talk more about this, you can just find us afterwards or something. But thanks for your attention.
Yeah. Thank you.